is true, the world changed that morning. Viewed in one way, it can be said we reached the end of an age-old quest for might, found push-button cataclysm. What king or emperor or general anywhere in history could have wished for more? Between the Arab dhow, those Elizabethan ships, and the Enola Gay, all of which we've just seen in episode 2, there was tremendous progress. But in the less than 4 decades since that bomb was detonated, technology has raced forward. Some say faster in those 4 decades than ever before, and more rapidly year by year. The changes have been vast, the elapsed time infinitesimal. But has it ever been any different? Has the pace of change really increased? If it has, what effect does that increased pace have on us, on our psyches, on our decision-making? We put the question to Roberta Miller of the Social Science Research Council, Lynn White of UCLA, and Joel Tarr of Carnegie Mellon University. The question inspired a split decision, beginning with Roberta Miller, who said emphatically that the pace of change has increased.
In the past, when technological changes were introduced relatively slowly, individuals adjusted first to the new technology, adjusted to a new vision of the world. Then the technology had an effect on their lives. In the 20th century, the situation has been far different. Changes have come very rapidly. We haven't adjusted to each change individually. And in fact, we've become accustomed to change. We expect change. Change is the normal state of events for us. In fact, we tend to look at the future with a great deal of optimism. We expect it to be different because technological changes will, of course, introduce new, change our standard of living considerably, and we think that it's going to be a good future. George Orwell notwithstanding, Americans have never feared a highly technological future, and Orwell's vision of 1984 has never been an American vision. There's some evidence that this optimism about the future is declining. Americans now are wondering if actually technology is going to bring the good things that it's brought in the past, or perhaps that technology has gone too far. If this decline in confidence is real, and it hasn't yet shown up in the public opinion polls, I think that we can expect to see a great deal of change in Americans' reactions to existing technology and in their acceptance of technological innovations.
And we'll hear more on what Americans think in just a moment. Lynn White is Emeritus Professor of Medieval History at UCLA. He reached into the past to support his dissenting vote.
The human race has always been in an uproar, and our task is to keep the uproar creative rather than destructive. That's the essential thing. But in the deep past, or what seems to be the deep past from most people's standpoint, things were moving as rapidly as they do today. Let me give you 2 concrete examples. In the 1180s, that is about 800 years ago, somebody in Western Europe invented the windmill. Well, the windmill spread like mad all over Western Europe. Indeed, within 10 years of its first appearance, the Pope was trying to tax it, a sure sign of its spread and success. In the late 12th century, the windmill was spreading as rapidly as the motion picture did in the early 20th century. Let me give you another concrete example. One of the greatest structural and architectural inventions in the world's history was the Gothic, which by the use of pointed arches enabled architects to reduce the mass of masonry in a building and thus, of course, cut down the cost enormously. In Western Europe, Gothic pointed structural arches first appear about, well, 1088 to be precise. 47 years later, work began on the great Abbey of Saint-Denis near Paris. And this was the first completely realized Gothic building. Well, 47 years that's pretty fast work. The only comparable revolution in architectural structure since then has been the steel-framed, the girder-framed skyscraper. This began in the 1850s and was completely realized about 45 years later in the 1890s. Well, give or take a couple of years. They were moving as fast in the late 11th and 12th century as they were in the late 19th. If you get up on a little hill, you know, and look out over a plain, and 5 miles away you see a big freight train going along, it looks as though it were just standing there. But if you're up next to the tracks, there's a great swoosh and roar, and it tears by. Well, we're right up next to the tracks in this year of grace. And anything a few centuries back seems almost static. But I repeat, this is an optical illusion.
Perspective can deceive, says Dr. White. We've always been on the move. Joel Tarr is professor of history, technology, and urban affairs at Carnegie Mellon University. And he agreed with Dr. Meller, but offered this qualifying thought.
I have little doubt that the rate of technological change has accelerated today as compared with the past. I do believe that continual change does affect the human psychic, but I think we have to be very careful to define the kind of change that we are talking about. For instance, I believe that changes involving factors such as migration and mobility themselves advanced by technological developments like in transportation cause more of an impact upon the human psychic than do technological changes experienced by a person standing in one particular site or vantage point. In regard to the question of politics and technology, I think there are two dimensions to the problem. One is that technology has grown much more complex, and two is that government is taking a much larger role in technological affairs today than it has in the past. And the complexity of technology itself requires more planning, but this is a society in many ways that is adverse to planning, and therefore we often find ourselves in a large amount of disarray in regard to technology and science policy as well as social policy.
In short, if the pace of change is the problem, planning is the solution. But Florence Skelly, Executive Vice President of Yankelovich, Skelly & White, tells us that, in fact, it's not the speed of technological change that's bothering Americans.
The public actually is more conflicted, more stressed by the rapidity of social change than they are by changes in technology. Among the general public, in terms of daily lives, the effect of the rapid shift in values has created more conflict and stress in the lives of people than has the speed of technological development. We've been living through a period where we've seen new definitions in the role of women, in the nature of the family, new goals in terms of what are the definitions of success and the good life, and those have created stress and conflict. In point of fact, the public looks to technology to help resolve some of those stresses, some of those conflicts, rather than as a source of stress. So the rapidity of social change has probably been more noteworthy to the general public than has the rapidity of technological advance.
Or, if you prefer, we're the prime source of our confusion. In our next program, James Burke will take us 900 years into the past to a simple little gadget that you attach to a horse. It changed England. Our next episode is entitled Distant Voices. For Connections, I'm E.G. Marshall, and I hope you'll join us.
Stay tuned for Love for Lydia on Masterpiece Theater, followed by an hour special reviewing the historic visit of Pope John Paul II. Our regularly scheduled programming will follow at 11 o'clock.